Welcome to the Scalable Real Estate Investing Podcast, where we discuss the most scalable strategies, tools, and approaches to successfully invest in real estate. Learn how to make the most impact of your time, automate your real estate investing business, find off-market deals with minimum time invested, and leverage your capital to create as many income streams as possible so that you can achieve true financial independence. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Mason Clement. Hi, scalable investors. Before we get into today's episode, I'd like to tell you about a group that I'm a part of called HiveMind. If you're serious about taking the next step in your real estate investing career, then this is definitely a group that you need to join. Some of our members are making $90,000 or more per month and as much as $300,000 on just one deal. And at the same time, you don't have to spend thousands of dollars like you typically would joining other mastermind groups. This is only $99 per month. And when you join, you'll gain access to a robust integrated CRM software that allows you to track your leads, run automated triggers, and ultimately scale your marketing efforts. So the difference here is that you're not left high and dry, but gain access to a support network that allows you to use that tool and learn from other more experienced real estate investors. So to learn more, go to scalablerei.com/hivemind. That's HIVEMIND. Thanks a lot. Let's get into the episode. Hi, scalable investors. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Scalable Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Mason Clement, and today we have with us Nick and Eric, who are running Winterspring Capital out of Boston, Massachusetts, private equity real estate firm. Got a lot going on. Developed over 56 million of multifamily assets, an additional 40 million of ongoing developments currently. So really excited to have them on the show. I think this is going to be a really interesting one from both the commercial real estate side of things and also developing commercial real estate. So Nick, Eric, how are y'all doing? What's going on?
Doing great.
Well,
Thanks for having us on.
Sure. So in case people aren't familiar with your backgrounds, why don't we just get into what brought you all together and just discuss your real estate journey?
Yeah, so Eric and I have been friends for almost 20 years now, met each other in high school. Always kind of had a little bit of a rebellious streak or anti-authority, wanted to kind of forge our own path, didn't really see ourselves, working for someone else the rest of our lives. This sort of people, we were good students, but we were also kind of troublemakers at the same time, that sort of a person. So never really wanted to go down the normal corporate route, but we didn't really know how we'd get there. So we went our separate ways in college. And I got my real estate license in 2011, and I was selling smaller apartment buildings in Massachusetts and Connecticut. And I said to Eric, I called him, I said, I think this is the way, we got to buy rental properties. This is how we could, get out of the rat race or whatever. So we had this plan, we'd save up money and buy here in our backyard in Boston, which is a pretty expensive market. So we were saving up for a couple of years. And then in 2015, we saw an opportunity in not buying a rental, which was our original plan, but in developing condominiums, which is actually an extremely lucrative path for us that we've been following ever since. It'll different from rentals where it's kind of your long-term plan is to get passive income with rentals. With the condominium development, it's a little bit like flipping. You're getting a big cash influx at the end of the project, which you can then pair with purchasing more long-term assets on the side with the money you've brought in. So this has kind of been the strategy we've used ever since 2015, and we've just been growing the business ever since.
Okay. So for the ones that are more buy and hold, are those indefinite time periods? Or are you looking for like 5-year hold periods? What's that look like?
So any of the, rental properties that we have right now, any of the multifamilies that weren't projects that we bought and held on to, they're currently indefinite. We've looked at some deals where we strategized, okay, this could be a value add play where we increase the value, exit in 5 years. And we've gone through a lot of deals like that, but anything we have right now is we have no plans to sell.
Okay, is it primarily multifamily, or are y'all doing some other property types for long term?
Mostly multifamily. So what we have going on right now, we have a couple of condominium development projects simultaneously. We've got an affordable housing project, which we're working with a local government. And then we have an office conversion, which would be, we're taking offices and then we're converting them into apartments and then either selling the apartments after the fact or refinancing.
Okay. That's really interesting. So let's get into the affordable housing. It seems like a kind of a opaque term if you're not really familiar with it. Can you just discuss that a little bit more? What is affordable housing? And I think y'all also mentioned on your background that there's some affordable housing crisis. Maybe people weren't even aware of it. So why don't we get into that and talk about how y'all are working in that space?
So, when people talk about affordable housing, you kind of see people think, okay, so just something that's maybe affordable, something that's not, a lot of the condos we deal with when we build a condo development and sell the individual units to homeowners in Boston, those can be 500 grand a piece. They can be $1.5 million a piece. So that's not affordable in any sense to the average person. You kind of hear that and think, okay, so this isn't affordable. So what is affordable? There's kind of like two schools to that. With the project we're doing with the city of Boston, these are actually affordable in the sense that the city places a sales price limit on what you can sell these for, and they're sold to people who meet a certain median income, a ratio to the median income. So for example, they'll say, okay, for our project, to give you kind of a real life example here, we're developing 7 home ownership units that'll be sold to individuals who meet either the 100% of the area's median income or 80% or 60. Those are kind of the 3 levels. So what that means is, they figure out what's the average income in this area based on, the population we have here. Based on that, the city or, whatever municipality you're dealing with, it's different for, all areas. But for Boston specifically, they have some sort of formula that they say, okay, based on that, these people take home this much in income. They really can only afford this much. So we're developing essentially condos, they're home ownership units that we can only sell for a certain amount. And in reality, the cost to build them is more than what we could sell it for. So we'd lose money by doing this project, because say it costs $400,000 or $500,000 to build one of these units in Boston, you're only allowed to sell it for $230,000. So that's a big delta. So that's why the city has to be involved and subsidize this so that they can come in and they make up that difference. So we create a new home for someone that couldn't afford maybe that same home on the open market. And they only have to pay a certain price. Now there are restrictions to that, so people can't take advantage of it. They can't buy it and then turn around and sell it as a market rate unit for $600,000, for example. But that's what we're talking about when we specifically, our team deals with affordable in Boston. It meets that, what Boston calls the inclusionary development policy, IDP, where there's fixed price limits on the specific units, and they can't be low quality. They have to meet a certain quality level. You can't just put a piece of junk out there. So there's waiting lists for these units, people who meet those income requirements or within them, I should say. And those are the people who can buy that. And that's what we mean when we say affordable. Now, some other developers might, just create a very, economically friendly unit where it's maybe very small, or, has very kind of not inferior, but kind of lower end finishes, that type of thing. And some people kind of might think, okay, this is a more affordable unit, but that's not what we're talking about when we talk about affordable. What we're talking about, these price restricted units. And it'd be the same for rentals. If we're working with the city on a rental development, same idea, except you can only rent them up to a certain rate based on that income. So maybe you'd rent that same unit for $3,000 on the open market. You might be restricted to say $1,300 for the affordable rental.
Okay, how does that play into Section 8 housing?
Section 8 is actually technically market rate or close to it. So that's more, you have a normal apartment and you could decide, all right, I'm going to rent this to whoever, no market rate people and Section 8 people. These projects are deed restricted, that you have to rent or sell to people of a certain AMI level. So you could have a building where you made a contract. They're called HAP properties, where you made a contract that all the people in your building would be Section 8. But that's still different from this, where this kind of has like a cap on the rents. Section 8 rents will be closer to the market, or sometimes at the market level, depending on where you're talking about.
Okay. But you said, like, for an example, it costs $450,000 to build it, and then you're selling it for $230,000 and the city's making up the delta. It's still, just from the surface there, it sounds like you're breaking even, which isn't the reason you're doing it, obviously. But not just out of the goodness of your heart. So are they adding some extra margin on there that's like predetermined up front?
Yeah, it's a developer fee. So like a typical market rate project, once you get to a certain size, you'll have a developer fee on it to cover the developer's overhead and everything. For these, what happens is the city puts out a request for proposal from developers, and they say, look, this is what we want here. These are the parcels of land that we currently have. We want this many units here. Please submit all developers interested, please submit your proposal, and in your proposal, show us all your costs, what your proposed developer fee would be, how long you can do it. Will you be able to meet these quality standards that we want? Sometimes they'll have you submit the design fully. Sometimes they'll have a design. In this case, the example we're talking about, they already had the design. So it's just about us coming in and saying, this is how much it would cost us to do it. This is how long it would take us to build it. And this is how much of a fee we would require in order to incentivize us to do it. So they compare all the proposals from all the developers. And, they don't tell us exactly how they choose, but I'm sure there's a combination of who can do it for the cheapest developer fee, who can do it for the lowest delta on that difference that they have to subsidize. And then they kind of weigh all the factors. Is it still going to be the quality we want? And if so, okay, let's go with the guys who maybe have the lowest developer fee, something like that. So that's how the developer makes some profit out of this, purely from that developer fee.
Okay, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
So if I was just kind of starting out in this, I think the first obvious thing would be I definitely should partner with someone. But like, how would I go about it? I guess first thing is like, how would I finance it? Just to get a construction loan and try to do like a 0% down equity piece, or how does it usually work? Just piecing it all together from your end.
The thing with affordable housing that's so confusing is how there's so many different ways you can approach it. So this project is a city funded project. We'll still get financing and all that, but they make up all the difference. Whereas you could get a federally funded project through low income housing tax credits, which is a completely different animal. So in our case, pretty good situation. It's city funded. It's coming out of their own, tax proceeds that they collect, and they've apportioned aside for affordable housing, which makes this job in particular pretty simple. We right now are going through the permitting phase, so we're putting some money up front for that, but we'll get that all recouped once we begin construction. We'll just requisition for all that back. But yeah, in a typical, like a low income housing tax credit affordable housing development, for example, you'll have, a normal construction loan on there, and lenders are compelled to lend to these projects. Like, there's laws that they have to lend a certain X amount of their, cash on hand on an average. I don't know exactly how it works, but basically a bank will be up for doing this because they're compelled to.
Okay. And then back to the crisis, is there really a crisis, or does that depend on each specific market for affordable housing?
There's definitely a crisis. And it's related to people in the lower income bracket of society, which is a huge, bucket of people. It's the majority of the country. And the government actually puts out these reports. There's one called Left Behind, I believe. And we've got some info, some graphs that we pulled from that on some of our articles on our website. But basically, the simple fact of the matter is people on like a minimum wage income, even if they work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, in a lot of states in the country, they can't afford a 2-bedroom apartment. It's like completely out of their reach, and this is due to a number of factors, but as developers, we're most intimately familiar with the supply shortage. There hasn't been the proper amount of development in the past 15 years to keep prices low enough. And in Boston, we're very familiar with that because there's so much red tape. There's a lot of NIMBYism, not in my backyard. You go to propose kind of a project you'd think on paper right next to the train station, a small multifamily project. People say, no, I'll build that somewhere else, not in my backyard. And then you go to somewhere else, they say the same thing. And this happened everywhere across the country. And I know Boston is especially strict and the neighbors are especially empowered due to like the nature of the politics here. But that sentiment exists worldwide. I actually heard an anecdote about the Eiffel Tower was proposed in Paris and all the residents of Paris were against it in the 1800s. And now it's like the symbol of the country of France. So it's this sentiment exists. People don't want change. And due to the fact that we're a democracy that has kind of empowered every individual voice, this is really slowing down construction. And as a result, prices and rents are just going to keep going up unless we can catch up with the demand. There's actually a graph again on our website that shows how in the red we are, like the amount of units we would need to be producing to keep prices on a stable, gentle increase, and how much of a deficit there is. So you can check that out on our website.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, and right now I was reading some articles that I know just in like the Dallas area, there's going to be 50,000 new homes coming online. That's still not enough to meet just overall demand, because not just affordable housing demand, but just overall demand is so high right now. So
exactly.
Yeah, very interesting. So you also have this concept of balance and long-term value-add multifamily investments where I guess you're constantly rotating and doing different renovations on those older units and balancing that with the short-term profits of condominium development. So how do y'all balance all these within your larger portfolio?
It is tough to kind of balance everything. There's a few ways we look at this. Diversification, like most investors know, is pretty important. And diversification, some people might think, okay, I'll invest in real estate, I'll invest in the stock market, I'll invest in this. In our point of view, from our perspective, it's all within real estate, just kind of different asset classes. And the development kind of keeps a lot of our investments going. We turn it around, we have profit, we sell all the units, then we have nothing we own with that development anymore. We sold them out to individual homeowners who bought the condos. But as far as balancing sort of, our rental investments with that, with the affordable housing, all these kind of different components, it is something we do in-house, and we'll dedicate time to each kind of area. But we just keep in mind the whole time, look, diversification is important. We can't put all our eggs in one basket. Condo developing is a bit riskier than some of these other things we do. There's not much risk to affordable housing development when you're working with the city because it's subsidized and there's a waiting list for buyers. There's not as much risk when you're talking about rentals because, as you probably know, and a lot of your listeners, multifamily is a very strong part of real estate. People are always trying to rent. Rents historically continue to go up. We see, population growth drives rents. So we pick areas where there's population growth, there's income growth, there's job growth. So a lot of these drivers that we kind of use to say, okay, this is how we'll implement the strongest, rental and value add play. This is how we'll work with the affordable. And then we'll continue to, take a bit more risk on the condo development and hope we can get those sales numbers on the condos that produce quick profits. Quick, I say quick, relatively quick, still takes a couple years, but it's not, a 10-year hold. And then we can reinvest those profits into those longer term plays on either side of that.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like just to keep the lights on and pay the bills, you would need to have the rent coming in for the multifamily properties, unless you're also doing some like wholesaling and flipping on the side. Do y'all do any of that?
We don't. You can consider the condo plays a flip in and of themselves. Sometimes we'll entitle a project, we'll take it through zoning. Maybe it's, an area that's zoned for 2 units. We'll go through the process, might take a year, sometimes lately in Boston, 2 years. And then we'll have increased the value of that property before we even put a shovel in the ground, and we'll sell it to another developer entitled. So they buy it from us, they buy the plans, they buy the property, they buy the full entitlement essentially. Then they can put a shovel in the ground. So that saves us some time. We don't have to completely construct it and wait to sell all the units. That might cut that original projection in half in terms of timeline. So maybe we'll make half what we would have made in terms of profit if we stayed the whole way and constructed it, but we eliminate all the risk, and then that allows us to continue funding other parts of the business.
Okay. But when it's entitled, is that equivalent to paper lots where you still haven't broken ground, or you don't even have like horizontal development? It's still raw land. It's kind of approved on paper.
Correct. Yeah. So basically, what we were getting into a little bit earlier, very bureaucratic red tape process here and a huge supply shortage. So basically, you've got to meet with the neighbors, you've got to meet with politicians, you've got to meet with the zoning board, you've got to meet with local civic groups. Sometimes could be a 2-3 year process depending on the size of the project. So getting through that and actually having the skill to get through that, having the right architect, having the right zoning attorney, being able to stand in front of a group of neighbors that hate you and survive to the next day, which is a skill. Doing all those things is really valuable. So like we picked up a lot. I'll give you an example. This is an interesting deal. We put a property under contract. We actually didn't purchase it. We put under contract to purchase with a contingency saying, okay, you have a single family house here, but you're in this zone where we could build a multifamily apartment building, and we'll turn it into condos. And we don't want to buy your property today for the market value. We want to wrap it up with a contract with you. You keep living there. And over the course of the next year, we're going to get this project approved. And for waiting, as a reward, we're going to give you above market value. That allows us to go through this kind of risky process without actually having to put the huge cash outlay of purchasing a property that we don't know will get approved or not. So we'll pretty much use that strategy whenever we do entitlement. Sometimes when we know it's kind of a sure thing, we could just buy it outright. But in terms of that project, we had it tied up. We never purchased it. And then now we're flipping the approved plans to another developer who's, doing like smaller buildings like this. And we took on very little risk. We didn't have to put a down payment on the property and purchase it and hold it while we were doing this. We had it all under a contingency. And now, without ever having to actually purchase the property, we're going to purchase it for like 1 day. So we have some kind of burnt cash on like closing costs and all that. But then we're going to turn around. We have a contract to sell it immediately to this other developer. So this entitlement, program we did here, so to speak, completely eliminated pretty much all the risk for us. And we're making, almost $1 million in profit from it.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, that's kind of the roadblock I'm running into right now. Is I'll come across some parcels and I'm thinking like, I don't know if it makes sense to spend like $250,000 in engineering costs to take this through the entitlement process. I mean, how do you get that cash up front? Because even like not even buying the property, if the seller gave it to you for free, you'd still have to incur all those other costs. So how do you do that?
Well, the way we do that is pretty much the only risk then we're taking that involved with that. We do have to outlay some of these costs. We've been lucky that we have a really good architect who we work with, who kind of, doesn't bill us instantly for the whole construction set. We kind of work with him as we go. We get a sense, okay, we thought we were going to get 10 units here. The neighborhood's really fighting us. We might get 6. Can this still work? And if it does, we'll continue down that road. If it doesn't, we might end it right there. And yeah, we ended up, say we do lose a little money. but the potential risk reward ratio there is so skewed in our favor that it's worth it to at least try, because in the end, we know we'll at least get something, or we probably wouldn't even involve ourselves with that project or that property. So for example, we might say, okay, as of right here, if we just went to the building department and said, all right, we want to build this building here, we could get a permit that day, depending on what the zoning code says. What we try to do is we try to get zoning variances to allow us to build a much bigger building that maybe wouldn't be allowed there under the code. But you go through all these processes that Nick was talking about, meeting with the neighbors and everything, and the civic groups, politicians, and you get that permit. You get those variances, I mean, that you can then use to get your permit. So a long way of saying that is a risk you have to take. But if you know you can at least get something as the worst case scenario that you don't need variances for, those are the types of projects we dive into. So worst case, which has happened to us on one of our deals, we are still able to build a 3-family in a 3-family zone and sort of manipulate the structure and size in such a way that it's still 3 very attractive units that will still, we won't even break even. We'll do a bit better than break even. Wasn't as good as our proposed 8-unit that we got denied at the zoning board, but it still worked. And we knew that from the start, or we wouldn't have purchased it.
Okay, that makes sense. So I think that there's like preliminary hearings that you'd want to do first, right? Just get some sketches out there, some drawings, and say, this is what I plan on doing. What's the likelihood of this being approved before you start investing more into the soft cost? Is that what y'all do?
Yeah, you do want to put feelers out there. It's tough to ask that question like as straightforward as you just put it, because people just say no. They'll say no to projects that do end up getting approved. So it is, there's a bit of a, I wouldn't say a dice roll. It's really about being kind of an expert, a local expert of the area you're doing this in. So for us, we can read zoning code inside and out. We're very familiar with zoning code of all the cities we build in this area. So for that example I gave you, that property was in a zone that doesn't allow residential apartments, okay? But it allows very densely built buildings. Like the floor area ratio there, which is just kind of the multiple based on the lot size, how big can your building be, was much higher than in most other areas of this neighborhood. It was just kind of a neighborhood, a section of the neighborhood, a street that was made for density, originally intentioned to be commercial buildings, but there's a bunch of residential buildings on the street already. So there's precedent for residential. The zoning code says you can build dense here. And we know that, hey, there's already another apartment building going up across the street. So we do all this homework ahead of time. We say, okay, well, look, all we're asking for here is a use variance, the use to make it an apartment building instead of a commercial building. And we see that there's precedent already on the street, regardless of what the zoning code says, that you can do that. So really to us, that project doesn't seem that risky. And we de-risked by doing our homework. We de-risked by getting in a contingency, and now we're de-risking again by selling it without even putting a shovel in the ground. So that's kind of, even though it's like Eric was saying earlier, it's like on paper, condominium development's risky, but it's like, it depends on who's doing it, because we're very risk averse people. So we use all these strategies to bring the risk level down as much as we can.
Okay. Are you raising capital for the soft cost? Like this?
We are. Yeah.
Okay.
Initially we didn't. We saved up, as Nick said, for that first project, and we rolled it in, and we started to see a lot of our peers in and around Boston, they're started off when we did, they're doing multiple projects at once. And we're looking at it like, we're waiting for one project to be complete before we move on to the next one. How do we make that happen? And that's when we started to realize, okay, we have to bring outside capital into this. So we tried to use our network to do that, and slowly kind of built up that base of people who like investing with us, people who want to reinvest with us. And that allowed us to start doing multiple projects at once, where we didn't necessarily need the capital coming in from the prior project to make it happen.
Okay. So to stand out from other syndicators, just like a typical plain vanilla multifamily type of syndication, is the return profile higher because they're taking more risk on the approvals and everything, or how's that look?
Yeah, it depends on the project, but we're, for development projects, we're in line with the typical development returns are higher slightly. So we have a project, a couple of projects actually, where you typically look at a return, an IRR for a development project in the 20s, and we'll exceed that. We'll be in the high 20s or the low 30s.
Okay. Is there any other way that you stand out from the syndicators, like other, I don't know, conceptual ways to explain it to the investor, or how do you do that?
I think just the nature of condo development itself is a bit more niche than a lot of these guys do. Everyone seems to be not everyone, but the large majority of syndicators seem to be focused on multifamily, and it's sort of I don't want to say clearer picture, because condo is almost like very clear. You just build and sell, but the outcome is a bit clearer with rentals. You have an idea where the market will be in terms of rents. You might go in, they're already at this, okay, specifically, I'm going to add this, this, and this in terms of value here. I'm going to lower this property management cost. This is the rents we project in 2 years. Whereas condo development, you might have a situation where, and this has happened to us several times, you project sales prices based on the current market because you kind of want to be a bit conservative, and the numbers work out really well. But by the time the project's finished, that area is sort of heated up in Boston, whatever that particular neighborhood or whatever you're dealing with, that particular sort of borough of Boston. And you might have much higher projections. So that's kind of a unique thing with condo development specifically. Or much higher sellouts, than your projections. So that's kind of a much more unique thing where there's room for additional profit well above the projections in a lot of the projects we've done. Then that sort of that difference between rental projections and the actual rents you get in the end are usually not too out of whack with what you projected, whereas condo prices can often be a lot higher, at least so far in our experience, just because they move with the home prices so much more. And there's a big delta in Boston between, between the kind of like the ratio of home prices to rental prices. You might see in some other cities, they kind of move a little, there might be a very easy ratio. You can say, okay, the typical home price is this on average, your typical rent for a 2-bedroom is X percent of that. In Boston, that seems like a much larger spread. There's a much higher demand for condos in Boston than a lot of these other cities we've seen and with other developers we talked to. So that's why we're kind of in this niche and how we set ourselves apart, and say, look, there's a potential for much higher returns with this specific type of development that we do versus, a standard kind of apartment development.
All right. So I'm just wondering, how do you know what the market's going to want? What type of products? Like, how do you know that this is the condo that they're going to be demanding in like 2 years when you finish it?
Number one is comps, comparable properties. So looking at comparable sales, we never underwrite for appreciation. We usually look at, okay, what did something sell for up the street? Another new construction building that's selling right now as we're conceptualizing a project that's going to be finished in 2.5 years. Then we'll take that price and we'll stress test it and drop it by 5-10% and see, is this a project that can withstand all this? So basically, going into a project, we from the beginning assume no appreciation and potential dip in the market. Sometimes we model it as severely as a dip as like 2008. And we don't really like to look at projects that would lose money in a disaster scenario. We want to basically in a disaster be breaking even. So that's kind of how we know price wise, we're confident, even though the project might be done in 2 years, we're pretty confident how we price things. As Eric said, we're pretty much always, our projections have always been, since we've started our company, below what the market ends up being by the time we finish that project. We usually end up having to raise our prices from what we projected. in terms of like the quality and everything, it's definitely just comparable properties. You know, we walk through different properties. Eric and I actually come from both having our real estate license. We sold a lot of our earlier projects ourselves. So we have a sales background. We understand what the buyers we want. We know what the demographic is. And now, we're doing our biggest project, which is like a really luxury building. It's in Brighton, close to Harvard and MIT. It's going to be 32 units. And for that one, we're working with a very high level broker in that specific neighborhood who's sold, thousands of these sort of units over the past 15 years. And he kind of modeled how the units would sell for us as well. So we kind of double checked, okay, what's he projecting? He actually, again, he projected a little bit higher than we did because we're pretty conservative when we underwrite. So a lot of different ways. And that's super important. You can't build something and put in all this time and effort and money, and then you're done and no one comes to build it. So make sure that there's precedent in the area for what you're trying to do, and don't underwrite for appreciation. That will burn you.
What do you mean by underwriting for depreciation?
So in like a typical multifamily like apartment, you will underwrite like for inflation, right? Every year you're going to say the rent will bump 2% or whatever. That's pretty standard once you've stabilized it. But for condos, I wouldn't recommend doing that. I'd take what's the sale price today as you're analyzing this deal, even though you're expecting to finish it in 2 years. Don't worry about how much prices have grown annually in the past 5 years. Don't add that. If anything, take away a little bit. And if the project still works, you got a good project on your hands. That's kind of our philosophy.
Okay, I see. So in terms of like sourcing these land properties to do the developments, are y'all just sending out mailers or cold calling or just getting from brokers? What's your process on that?
Combination, really. We have a good friend of ours we've known for a long time who joined the company. He looks on a platform we have access to, and he'll find, parcels of land that might be in a certain zone, that might be a certain size, and say, okay, what's the status here? Oh, it's like an old warehouse. He'll find the owner, call them, say, hey, is this something you'd be interested maybe in selling? Not that it's on market or anything. It's off market, of course. It's just based purely on the location and size. And sometimes he'll get a guy that says, call me back in 5 years, or another guy says, I'm dying here, don't ever call me again, or let's talk, so it's all these sort of different outcomes. So that's one way we do it. Then we do have a lot of brokers now who we work with that have seen us put up some of these buildings, and they think, okay, look, these guys can get a deal done. I'm going to send them stuff. That's this luxury building Nick was talking about came to us from a broker who was working with another developer who had the land under his control. And he showed us this, and we worked on it for a while, and we said, okay, let's make it work. So we just closed on that. So those are two ways, through our own outreach, and then actual brokers sending us deals, which sometimes we'll see like 10 a week. Sometimes we'll see one. And then sort of a third way is we have our real estate licenses. So we do use the multiple listing service online. Everyone sees that, the whole market. So it's a little more competitive, and there's a lot less, potential for serious value on there. But you don't want to overlook it. A couple of our projects we have now were found on MLS. I mean, one of them even it ended up being a 6,400 square foot parcel, which for Boston is pretty large. You can get 5 to 10 units on there or more, depending on the neighborhood you're in, and make it look like it fits in. We found this parcel on MLS. It was a single family home, but the agent had listed it only as 3,200 square feet, the lot, because it was 2 lots, and he made a mistake. So there's little inefficiencies sometimes if you really pay attention. So that made a massive difference to us, and it was being overlooked by most other developers. They said, it's too small. So we found out it wasn't too small, and we were able to lock that one down, and that was a purely on-market deal. So those are kind of the 3 ways we do it.
Okay, yeah, it's really interesting. It's been like I'm trying to think, I know starting out a couple years ago, I bought 2 rent houses off the MLS, and I vowed to never buy off the MLS again. But but like that's the total rookie mistake, and you only go to MLS to sell your properties, not to buy them. But I do hear you there, and over the years, I've been thinking like, you know what, there's probably opportunity there. I just don't want to spend the time to look for it. But if you're making it outsized profits on the development on the back end, then it could definitely be worth the time.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Great. You also mentioned that you can scale your business through wisdom and lessons from history and philosophy. I think mindset and just things like that are so important, and sometimes it's really hard to understand unless you're actually in the business and trying to grow it. So can y'all hit on that a little bit on how you've used this different approach as well?
Yeah, we've got a couple different, I'm a big history nerd, and Eric likes it too. He gets to hear me ramble about it sometimes, you know. Not
Learn more from Nick than anything in school that I learned.
I can't help myself sometimes. But so one thing I like, and I wrote an article about this a while ago, but if you look at the history of Japan, they had the Meiji Restoration in the late 1800s. Basically, you're looking at a country that was kind of like in medieval times, and then the Americans and the Europeans showed up at their doorstep and said, "Hey, we're going to come in here and, you know, colonize you and take advantage of you and all this stuff." And now I know the Japanese, once they gained this power, they did some horrible things with it, but let's not talk about that. The point is how they responded to this threat. They basically said, all right, we're not going to let ourselves be pushovers. The West has an advantage over us. How do we catch up rapidly? And they studied all the Western nations. They studied America's infrastructure and postal system. They studied Great Britain's Navy. They studied Germany's army, you know, and they basically picked and choose the best parts of each country that they saw. And that's what allowed Japan to go from a medieval nation to a world power over the span of like 50 years in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So I call it the Meiji method. Is basically, if you're trying to get into an industry, which in 2015, we didn't know that much. You know, we knew, oh, you can build here and sell them. But like the amount of knowledge we've acquired since then has been, you know, crazy. It's like night and day. That's because we're always trying to see, hey, what's that guy doing? He's really successful. He's a really successful developer. Hey, this guy's building in a town where the numbers don't make sense. How is that possible? Oh, he's using historic tax credits, and he's got low income housing tax credits. And you pick up all these tricks because you're looking at what the successful people do. Why am I behind? What am I lacking? And then you absorb that into yourself. So I call it the Meiji method. It's similar to what Japan did, and I think very applicable to business.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. Really just kind of building on the shoulders of giants and just improving upon what they're doing, just kind of picking and choosing what's working best. So y'all hit on it a little bit earlier in terms of market selection, like looking at, you know, where's the population going and growing number of jobs and everything like that. But could y'all quantify that a little bit more in terms of like what you would expect? And like, is there minimum populations, for example, or a minimum percent increase in population or jobs in certain areas before y'all even consider it?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. One thing we focus on is the reason we like Boston so much is the population is just continuing to grow. So we only look at places where there is population growth. It doesn't have to be extreme because you want something that seems at least steady, but also going in the right direction steadily. So, you know, if you see 5+% or, you know, something like that, that's very good. But really just continued growth works for us. Anything with continued growth and a decent population size to begin with. It can't be something where, you know, there's a population of 2,000 and it grew by 20%. It has to be sort of an established area, continuing to grow. Rents are continuing to grow, but not, you know, you'll see a lot of times the last year or two in the Southeast that really of the country, rapidly growing rents. And now a lot of these new buyers who are getting into some of these big multifamily deals down there, they'll say, oh yeah, you know, the average rent growth over the last 6 years has been, you know, 11% annually. So I'm going to project that when I buy this thing, the next 5 years will be 11%. So you have to factor that type of stuff in too, like use a little common sense. Okay, this is maybe clearly a you know, I use the term bubble, but you know, sort of a hyper increase that's not going to be sustained. So we look at what looks like it could be sustained, what has proven that it's sort of you know, has economic drivers like certain, you know, employers. One thing, you know, I know you always talk about, Nick, and it's true in Boston, a lot of lab space is going up. There's a lot of, you know, it's a big biotech industry, medical industry in Boston. There's all the colleges in Boston, Harvard, MIT. So you have a lot of research coming out of there, research hubs. A lot of companies are starting to headquarter in and around Boston, Cambridge, right near where we are in our with our current development. So there's things like that we look at and we kind of line them all up. We say, okay, there's a lot of new employers coming in here. Population has far exceeded what the projections were for this city 5-10 years ago. And the steadily increasing population growth is, say, a few percent a year nonstop. Rents are continuing with that. Home prices are continuing with that. And we say, okay, we kind of use a common sense analysis and put it all together and say, yeah, this is clearly not some outlier situation. This is going to continue based on our research. That's kind of like the mindset we have when we go through all this.
Okay. Are y'all involved in any other markets outside of the Boston MSA?
Go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, yeah, like Eric mentioned, we were actually really actively pursuing the Southeast, and we put a pause on it because the cap rate compression there has gone a little out of control for us. We don't feel comfortable with it. Might not be a bubble, but it seems a little unusual to us. So we put a pause on that. We're staying in our backyard. You know, you can actually kind of there's so much eyes on the Southeast and Texas, and I feel like you can actually kind of get a bit of a discount up here right now. And these are the primary markets have been established for decades. So pretty good.
Yeah. And I think what you're doing in terms of taking things to the entitlement process and all that, you really need to be dialed into that local market. And so it might be hard to just spread across nationwide, and because it's so difficult just to know on a micro level, like that city or county and all their different processes, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So are y'all primarily in like Boston proper and its suburbs, or do y'all ever do stuff more in rural area, like a tertiary part of the MSA? Or does it really
Mainly
need to
Boston proper? All our condo projects so far have been in Boston. Right outside, there's some, you know, surrounding cities that to an outsider almost feel like part of Boston. They are technically their own municipalities. Places like Cambridge, you know, where Harvard is, that almost feels like part of Boston. And it almost is, but it is technically its own city with its own zoning laws. And Somerville is a similar city to Cambridge right there. All part of the Boston MSA. But we do go now, we're looking a bit outside that, not quite to like rural areas, but sort of what we call gateway cities that are maybe within a half hour of Boston. With growing populations, you know, decreasing crime rates. Maybe they had a bad reputation, but they're coming back. Old manufacturing cities, you know, from the 1800s. That type of thing. We're looking at that too now and investing in places like that.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like your office conversion project. It seems like you could convert some of those warehouses into really cool luxury condos or something.
That's right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm going to include your company's website link in the show notes, but if someone wanted to get in touch with y'all directly, what's the best way for them to learn more and contact you?
Good place to get in touch with us is on Instagram at Winterspring Capital. Eric and I are also on LinkedIn. Nicholas Earls, EARLS, and Eric D. Nicola, DINICOLA. Both on LinkedIn, pretty active there. Anyone have any questions, interested in partnering, investing, anything like that, get in contact with us. I also wrote a book that goes through the condo development strategy. If anyone's interested, you can get that at our website, winterspringcapital.com/development-book.
All right, great. I'm going to put that in the show notes as well. It's really helpful. But thanks again for taking the time to jump on here. I feel like we probably could talk all day. I have an infinite amount of questions, but got to move on with the day. So thanks again. Maybe we'll do it again soon.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Thank
We'd
you.
like to.
That was
Thanks
great.
for having us on.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, that's another episode of Scalable Real Estate Investing. Thank you for tuning in. Please be sure to leave a review and subscribe on whatever channel you're using to listen or watch these episodes. And also be sure to go to scalablerealestateinvesting.com, scroll to the bottom, and fill out the form to sign up for our email. And you could also reach me directly at mason@scalablerealestateinvesting.com. That's MASON at scalablerealestateinvesting.com. If you'd like to get in touch with me to either partner on deals or even be considered to do your own episode on this podcast. Thanks again, and have a great day.